What is happening, everybody? So, I want to chat about the Nissan 350 and 370Zs. These cars have a very special place in my heart. I owned an 03 350Z, and when I lived in Northern California, I used to love running that car either up through the mountains, basically through La Honda, making like an Alice's run with that thing, or take that thing out on PCH, point it south, and head straight down to Santa Cruz. I used to have a blast running that car on those long, twisty roads or in those tight mountain roads. It was just so much fun because, you know, it didn't have a lot of torque. It had good horsepower and really good driving dynamics. And so it was easy to flat foot the car through apexes and never have to worry about the car really ever stepping out or doing anything that would spook you. And because it had a bit of a lack of torque, if the road conditions were a little bit, well, let's say less than perfect, if the car did hit a wet spot, which was common, especially up in the mountains, it wouldn't just get out of sorts. It was easy to just maintain either a slight drift through the corners or whatever the case was, and just have a ball with it. And there's actually kind of a part of me that wishes I would have kept that car because, God, I just had so much fun with it, especially in an environment that was so well suited to it. But times change. But let's talk about that car's introduction and why it holds such a significant spot, at least in terms in, you know, pony cars or sports cars or however you want to call it, because the 350Z is actually a very interesting car, and I guess by association the 370, but it came at a later date and doesn't really apply to this portion of the chat. When the 350Z was released, it fell right in the middle of pony car and sports car. Think of it as fell right in the middle of Mustang and Corvette, because at the time there was no Camaro. And this is 2003, when a pony car or a sports car was doing very well to make 300 or 350 horsepower. Well, the 350Z was making just south of 300, and of course in later versions, actually recently or soon to be released after its release, redundant, sorry, but would be closer to 300 on the dot. It was great power to weight ratio in terms of horsepower, and the torque was never overwhelming to the chassis, so it made for a great driver's car, especially under twisty roads or, you know, just back road canyon carving. And it never had the torque of, say, a Corvette or the price point of a Mustang, so that's why I say it fell more or less in the middle. And again, the power ratio, the power to weight ratio was such that it never, you didn't feel like you were giving anything up by going with that V6. It was a great running engine, and again, fun to drive, got great gas mileage too. Well, as times progressed, basically up until 2010, that's the slot that that car held, and for 7 years, it was definitely an option if you were looking to buy a Mustang and even a Corvette for the time. There was a 350Z. It was a solid sports car, and another thing that it did is it really infused a lot of life into Nissan. Well, after 2010, a lot of things changed. The new Coyote platform was released, 415 horsepower, and came at a price point that was real competitive now with that 350Z. Whereas before, yeah, the Mustang was less expensive, but now you could get your Mustang with 400 plus horsepower at a price point that would match the 350Z more or less. Well, that makes the 350Z that much less attractive. So when the 370Z was released, a lot of Nissan enthusiasts were saying you, as a company, talking about Nissan, simply did not do enough to keep pace. Well, again, as subsequent years would move forward, the 370Z really was left unchanged. I mean, yeah, you could find a Nismo version of it, but the cost of the thing, well, it would put you into almost GT500 money at that point. We're talking, 2011, 2012. This just simply wasn't an option, and so the 370Z more or less became a forgotten car in a way. I mean, you had to be going out of your way to want a 350Z, or 370Z, I should say. Well, now with the re-release of the Gen 5 Camaro, it made another player in the pony car or sports car category. And especially when you're talking about playing to a specific price point and to a specific age demographic. When the Gen 5 was released, alongside with the Mustang, and of course with the Challenger having already been released, this is the resurgence of the American muscle car era, and this is what brings us to today. The 370Z is still mired at 330 horsepower. The Mustang for 2018 will chime in at 455. The Camaro is already sitting at 455, which is rumored to be bumped up to, I would say, probably 470, I think, within the next few years. You've got the Scat Pack and SRT Challengers all running with the 392, making 485 horsepower. Where does the 350Z even fall in line now? Because if you're looking at it in terms of a bargain sports car, it doesn't fall into that category because it's as near as it doesn't make enough of a difference to count the same price, base model for base model, as the Mustang GT, which makes now 120 horsepower more once it's released in 2018. What kills me is that Nissan hasn't done anything to bring the 370Z back into the fray. The car is there. The chassis is there. They just need a better engine. I find it difficult to believe that with the vast resources of Nissan that either a boosted version of the 3.5 liter or say a small V8, maybe a derivative of one that they're already making somewhere north of 400, maybe 430 horsepower, couldn't be wedged into the thing. Because let's face it, the garden variety recipe for a drift car is to find a 350Z, yank out the 6-cylinder and the transmission, throw in an LS3 with a Tremec 6-speed, perfect drift car. I find it difficult that if the aftermarket and backyard hobbyists can do it themselves, that Nissan can't make that switch as well. And it would do a ton for the brand to bring that car back into the fight, because right now the only car that they have that is really, I guess, noteworthy in terms of performance would be the GTR. But it's priced so far into the stratosphere that it doesn't even come into context when guys are talking about pony cars or, you know, any type of an affordable performance car of today. One other thing that is killing me about the 350 and 370Z is that the FRS is a real thing. The FRS right now is stripping sales away from the 370Z for a couple of reasons. One, it's less expensive, and that's a big deal. And two, well, it seems like that car was just made to have that, I think it's an Edelbrock supercharger that they make for it. You would almost think that they built the thing in cahoots, because that car stock, admittedly, is pretty slow. That car with that supercharger is a riot. So there's that to consider. And really, the other issue that they've got is, well, Toyota, with their conglomerate, or their collaboration, I should say, with BMW, will soon be releasing the Supra. Now, yeah, we don't know what the pricing is on that thing yet, but again, it's not going to be the Supra of old. It's more or less going to be a smaller sports car. I believe it's going to be like a Z4 replacement, and that's kind of where they're going with this on the BMW side. The same platform is going to be used by Toyota. Rumor has it that thing's going to be released with about 400 horsepower, give or take. Not sure how it's going to get there, whether V6 turbos or, you know, whatever. But the fact of the matter is that those are the things that are being talked about now, and that's what people are getting excited about. There's nothing being said about the 370Z getting any kind of power boost ever, which is a shame. And in fact, if you are a Nissan fan, you almost start to get the idea that they're just kind of sitting on the 370. And it is almost kind of falling in lockstep with, you know, the whole Porsche, you know, Cayenne or Cayman or whatever the thing is. I'm not big into Porsches, but that versus the latest edition of the 911, you know what car I'm talking about. Basically the Boxster thing. that car, you almost get the sense that it just was never made better, because if it's better, then it starts to pilfer sales away from the GTR. Or, I'm sorry, from the 911 Turbo. Well, you get the idea that if the 370 was made better, maybe somehow or another it would pilfer sales from the GTR, when in fact, they're two completely different cars. They're catering to two completely different customers and demographics. So, Nissan, if you're ever going to do anything with that platform, please jump on it now. I would love to see a 400Z, you know, maybe a 4-liter V8, something that's making around 400, 425 horsepower, something that will compete not only in terms of performance, but price point with the Mustangs and the Camaros, and make that a real battle. Because right now, I gotta be honest, the pony car wars are getting a bit stale. I mean, here we go again. Mustang is going to make a little bit more power. Camaro's going to camp out. Wait till Mustang gets a bump in power, and then they'll bump the power in the Camaro, just trying to be more Mustang than Mustang as normal. And the problem is, they do a great job of it, so how can you fault them? Without a third entity in that fight, it just again becomes stale. And you may say, well, what about the Challenger? The Challenger was never ever meant to be part of that fight. The Challenger is its own entity. It's the only muscle car that's being made, and that seems to be the way of the world right now. So, God, if you've made it this far, post up your comments. Let me know if you've got any cool experiences with those 350 and 370Zs. And that's a wrap on this one. Y'all have a great one. Adios.